first of all, just really want to thank you all, Kristen, for sponsoring us this year. It's we really appreciate it and appreciate your support in general and your participation. So thank you so much. I just want to point out that Rob has been doing a fantastic job, our staff liaison, in posting all of our past events on the website. So if you missed anything, they're all there and you can go back and watch them. Please feel free to share them with others. Ashley and Josh, who will be our new incoming chair-elect, and myself met last night to start planning for next year. So plans for that will be shared with you all soon. We will and then we are trying to plan a get-together for our last monthly meeting, which will be on December 2nd. So mark your calendars. We will send you some updates on where we're gonna meet up, finally see each other in person. So today we're gonna be talking about the climate equity plan again, but this time it is officially approved and not theoretical anymore. And so we have a really special guest, Phoebe Romero, who has been championing this plan for so long. And she's going to be talking a bit about some of the changes that have occurred through the public comment period to when it was adopted, because everything that we've talked about this year has been from the 2020 draft. And then she'll also go in a little bit to on the implementation plan. So a warm welcome to Phoebe, and I will let you share your screen.
Okay, hi everybody. Nice to meet you. I'm Phoebe Romero. I work with the Office of Sustainability. I'm going to share a link to the resolution that City Council passed. So basically on September 30th, and this is just kind of my intro, on September 30th, they passed two resolutions related to the climate plan. One of them was a resolution that simply approved the plan. It said, yes, we support the plan, kind of check mark the contents. The second resolution, which I think is very important to this conversation and certainly to my role and the role of the climate team in the next few months, is their resolution on implementation, which is the one that I have linked. That one gives very specific direction to what this work would potentially look like in the next couple of months, outlining some of the priorities. And so I will go into a summary of what's in this resolution, but I think it's an important document just to share to you all to for later viewing, because this is a lot of how the city functions is based off of these types of resolutions that council pass. And so just an intro, and I know that y'all have had I'm going to share my screen now. I know that y'all have had a lot of overviews already specifically about this climate plan and these overviews of the different sections. And so can everybody see my screen here?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. And so I'll kind of go through some of the sections a little bit quicker, highlight where changes took place, then go into some of the implementation slides and some of the initiatives we're working on currently. But I also want to really open this up as an opportunity for like Q&A and really answer direct questions from you all that you might have in this process. And so hopefully not spending too much time kind of talking at you, but rather having a back and forth conversation about some of the initiatives that I think we'd like to work on, and certainly the ways that you as individuals and as representatives from your organization can get involved in. So I'll go from there. And so something that's really important that, from a big picture perspective that was approved by council is this net zero community-wide target. And so previously in 2016, when the 2015 climate plan was approved, there was a new target set, or I think it was in 2015, the new target was set by council to have a net zero community-wide target by 2050. And this is really aligned with like the Paris Climate Accords and a lot of the national movement to have this conversation about, neutrality by 2050. In conversation with our steering committee of community members and concerned residents from different, organizations and different perspectives, it really became clear that based off of the reporting that has been released by organizations like the United Nations and C40 and, any other science-based targets about the speed and the severity of climate change, it became very clear that, reduction by 2050 is simply not enough to get us to where we need to be on a global scale of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and warming and all those things. And so based off of that urgency and particularly in the context of being a, living in the United States, living in a city with wealth and kind of from an equity perspective on a global scale, the need to also address where the disproportionate emissions have come from globally and historically. And so with that in mind, there's a new goal proposed for net zero by 2040. It's incredibly ambitious and it's going to be a very difficult, I think, goal to get to, but it is one that we wanted to kind of work back from that vision of creating an aggressive target and kind of framing our conversation with the fact that this is an aggressive plan and it is also an equitable plan. And so wanted to just provide that. I don't know how much the big target was discussed, but that is one of the biggest, I think, changes in this plan, particularly from the 2015 version. And so a summary of the plan is that it had 17 goals across 5 different sections and 74 strategies. There are 4 cross-cutting strategies that we felt kept coming up in all of these conversations. And we finally decided, they don't fit within a specific topic area. They actually are these big picture goals that we should be thinking about throughout all of these initiatives. And so I'll go over what those look like and what those are. And then, lastly, we do have an equitable process. And so there were a lot of lessons learned about how to advance this work forward using incentives and communication and thinking about health and job creation and really knowing that every single map and all of the data that we look at shows the effects of inequities from city planning and from lack of social services and resources to communities in the Eastern Crescent, and what can we do to address that, and what is the role of climate action in that. We certainly can't address all of the social issues, but we know that there are a lot of intersections, and in that lens, anti-displacement being an obvious, I think, issue in our city that is inherently related to our goals in housing and green gentrification and all of these issues that can come up on implementation. And so really thinking critically about how climate action can be done in an equitable way that at least aims to, we can't predict what will happen when we implement a policy, but we can look at the past actions and what those consequences have been to inform the way that we think about things in the future. And so the final goals and strategies, again, I'll go over them. Don't have to spend a whole lot of time on them, but happy to answer questions and go back to anything. We had 4 cross-cutting strategies, and these are, kind of big picture really thinking about green jobs and entrepreneurship. And this is something that I think, Kendall and Sarah, one of my colleagues at Austin Energy Green Building, and Jen Krieger, who was formerly in our office and now has her own firm, have really been talking about what it might look like to have a mentorship program around embodied carbon and basically like trying to take a lot of these concepts and make it more equitable as far as like who is receiving access, not just to like skills-based training, but also to really think about like the role of entrepreneurship. Like how can we support small businesses and people of color-owned businesses in this? How can we also think about leadership, right? And it's not just about doing direct solar installation. It's all of the different sectors, and it's not just having college programs, but it can also be having high school programs, and it can be having career transitional programs, and really what that equitable aspect of that role is. And so if you all are not familiar with the Austin Civilian Conservation Corps program, that is a really great local example of a program that was founded on equity principles, that has had a pilot phase and will be looking to expand, and looked at not just like tree planting and green infrastructure, but also looked at artwork and murals as part of this sustainability lens that extends beyond what people would normally think about, like in really thinking about the local art scene and supporting that arts community as well. With prioritizing local community initiatives, one of the things that we kept hearing over and over was that we really need to acknowledge that community members have been doing this work for a long time and know and understand their communities. Community organizers, neighborhood level organizers understand the needs and the priorities of their communities best. And so that part of that work may also take just supporting and elevating that work rather than trying to start a new program, right? And so how can we acknowledge some of these existing initiatives and really push this work on a local level? And then again, because we are a rapidly growing MSA to strategy 3, we're not just even though as the city of Austin, we really are talking about our boundary, it is really important that we work on a regional level to try to advance these issues, especially as we know many people that drive into the city of Austin are coming from other cities, right? So how do we best work with not just regional entities, but other governmental institutions? And so I, for example, am on the Clean Air Coalition Advisory Committee through the Capital Area Council of Governments. And that is a coalition that is made up of the 5-county region. And there are members of the Clean Air Coalition that are, staff from the different cities surrounding the area and the different counties surrounding the area. And then the Clean Air Coalition itself is made up of elected officials from those areas. And so thinking about the different avenues that have been used and trying to really make sure that it's not just the city of Austin that has a climate plan, but like how does it influence surrounding areas as well. And then lastly, really there was there's a lot of, I think, technological advancement when it comes to carbon dioxide removal. This is not my area of expertise, but this is a lot of what we had heard from particular stakeholders as to something to look to. I will say that carbon offsets, we acknowledge that should not be where the net zero is coming from, right? We really want to aim to reduce as many emissions locally as possible. And so the carbon offset portion of this, I think the goal was to try to keep that under 10%, right, of the total emissions. And so wanted to mention that, we acknowledge that the importance of reducing these emissions locally has not just benefits to our, overall carbon footprint, but local health benefits as well. So important to us as well. On the buildings portion of things, the main one I want to highlight is strategy 1. That's the only one that has changed. initially we were looking to have net zero carbon for new buildings by 2030, and then I think all buildings by 2040. That made sense because the target was neutrality by 2040. But in order to have a more consistent 2030 theme across the different strategies, we removed that and aim to have not just a reduction from existing buildings by 25%, but also having a specific natural gas target. And so just to give some background on that, Austin Energy does have a, it's a municipality, and so it has the power to kind of build policies around its grid mix. And so the idea is to, as the grid gets cleaner with different policies, then we will have to really focus, and this is, a national trend, really focusing in on those on-site emissions, which locally really come from natural gas. And so what can, Texas Gas Service, who was a participant, do to lower their impact, and having, recognizing the different levels of the different avenues. It can be, pushing for electrified buildings, pushing for, emissions reduction specifically from the utility for those existing buildings. And so, again, you can kind of read more into the different strategies that were written out, but with, in this specific section, I think that was the major change. There was a lot of back and forth about it, but this is finally what, we all came to an agreement on and what was approved by council. The next section that had a lot of changes was the transportation and land use section. And so I think a big part of the specific changes, you'll see a lot of specific numbers on this 135,000 housing units, 60% affordable housing using 75% within the half mile. All of this was to ensure that there was alignment with the strategic housing blueprint. And so I think one really important part of this, work is to really familiarize and you all may have maybe been working in Austin for a long time and doing this and working as practitioners already, but a lot of the plans that are done throughout the city, I think one thing that we really wanted to make sure was to make sure that there was alignment and ensure we can try to be more specific about things, especially in the lens of equity, but that we were making sure to call out kind of where those alignment areas are. And that was in part due to feedback from council on some of these changes. And so you'll just see like more specific alignment there with the strategic housing blueprint. And then with goal number 3, I think originally there was this was written as a vehicle miles traveled type of goal, and it was really confusing because it was a really small percentage, and just a lot of the feedback that we got was, this doesn't make a lot of sense when we're trying to communicate this to the public, right? Like most of this is just trying to make sure that we are having this information set in a way that the average person who maybe cares about climate change but isn't familiar with all of these specifics, and you certainly don't need to be, and it's our job to be accessible, then this was changed to 50% of trips. And so it's simple trips. It's not the Austin Strategic Mobility Plan, for example, really talks about commuting to and from work and builds goals around that. This talks about all trips in Austin, so every trip that you make, not just to work but also to the grocery store, to running any form of errand. And then something else that was added here was the telecommuting aspect. I think particularly in the context of the pandemic, making sure that we were alluding to the fact that it was a huge privilege for those that were able to work from home to do so, and that it might in certain sectors of the workforce have created, an avenue for having more flexible telecommuting pathways in the future. And so that was a lot of, from a lot of the advocacy of residents to make sure that this was clearly stated, because I think it previously was talking more about like different mobility options, but the telecommuting aspect and working from home was added to this. And so I think these, each goal was slightly modified, but I think that the spirit of the strategy remained the same. It was really just taking, and finding ways to fix some of those numbers and make sure things were aligned, and then kind of revise for better understanding. With the transportation electrification, those did not have changes. And so if you got an opportunity to go to the other sections, I can briefly say it's really talking about miles traveled being electrified, ensuring that there's equitable distribution of charging stations, and then again working hand in hand with the regional MSA to ensure that transportation electrification is done as an area. We're a leader in that work. And a lot of the questions that we get are, well, how can we, like, we need to get rid of cars, and we need to build a more walkable city and better transit, rather than trying to push for more cars but have them just be electric. And I think that this is a valid concern, but a lot of what we've also discussed is that in the next few years, like, it's great that Project Connect passed. I think there's a lot of work to make this city more transit friendly, and to have more walkability and more bikeability. And there's certainly a lot of safety issues and Vision Zero, types of projects being done by the city. But I think we are in a really difficult space, in that, like, both of these things need to be happening, but there is this gap of time between this being a fully, like, walkable, like busable city, and also making sure that if people are going to buy cars, that what are we doing to work with dealerships to ensure that there's enough outreach done so that people understand electric vehicles, and recognizing that this has also kind of been touted as like a luxury good, and like, what are the equity implications of that? And so just wanted to kind of mention that about this section. Something that was really great, again, I know there was a whole section about this, but something that was really exciting about this plan was really thinking beyond our regional boundaries and those immediate emission impacts that we have, and really thinking about the food that we consume, the products that not just the individual consumes, but also large institutions consume, really working hand in hand with our circular economy program. And then also, acknowledging the role of Austin's zero waste plan. This actually, number 3, was something that changed from the original, or the first draft that was released in September. Austin Resource Recovery is undergoing a zero waste plan revision, but that has not been released, and does not have a new goal released, and there's a little bit of a delay from that end. And so I think originally, we were hoping to align those things. And so because we don't have that sort of final number, then we landed on adding this last strategy to just have language that says, when there is a new plan adopted from the zero waste goal, then we will aim to pursue that reduction and work hand with them. And then lastly, natural systems. I know, again, you all probably already saw this, but it's about protecting land, thinking about our canopy cover, regenerative agriculture in the rural, and reducing emissions, and then really thinking about city-owned land, and like, how can we manage that land in a way that is sustainable and maximizes community benefits as well. And so again, happy to go back to any of these, but I don't want to, kind of be too repetitive with y'all. And so this is one of the, I think, really important things to just acknowledge here, that we acknowledge that in order to move towards more aggressive action, we need to have aggressive targets. But we also know that, there's going to be this gap where we need to, hopefully in conjunction with, federal level and maybe one day state level policies, we can work towards meeting these aggressive targets, because there really needs to be kind of a comprehensive change to the way our infrastructure is set up, and to the way our grid mix is set up. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that we want to aim to reduce all of these emissions, but it's going to take a lot of work, and it's a big journey ahead of us. And so to implementation, I linked the council resolution on implementation, and I wanted to just highlight the key takeaways here. Something that council asked for is that staff identify, or the city manager via staff identify leadership responsibilities for the implementation of this plan. And so that's really looking at, the city of Austin has a climate and leadership team that was put together a year or so ago, that is, the leadership from the different departments that this work affects. So really, Austin Energy, Austin Transportation, Sustainability, watershed protection, right? All of these different departments, which is a lot, right? That kind of interface with climate issues, and that they would then oversee the successful implementation of this plan. And so the goal is to continue with that sort of at-large, kind of umbrella leadership team that's overseeing this work. But then, of course, there will be a lot of departmental coordination, like from my end, and all of our team's ends, to work with all the departments that help draft these goals, and to check in consistently, and to look at the strategies. And I didn't get to go into every single strategy, but we have a spreadsheet where we've broken down every single strategy and tried to figure out which of them are, somewhat underway, and which of them are not, and really trying to focus on who can pull what levers across different departments to bring these to fruition. And so council also asked for the office to provide quarterly updates during council work sessions. So typically council work sessions happen the Tuesday before a Thursday climate meeting. And so it would be, coming and providing updates to that. And then something that's, really important is this third bullet: identify current and mid-year opportunities at different budget levels, and a proposed budget for future projects. And so this is really where the financing comes in. We've gotten a lot of questions about this, so council's really saying, what can be implemented in this plan without any budget, but just with, the intention and the organization with current resources. What can be implemented if budget is moved around and kind of reallocated and reprioritized. And then lastly, what would be the budget in future, like if council passes a brand new budget, what could be prioritized and what would be those dollar values. And so again, a lot of work to be done to figure those numbers out. In the spirit of transparency and accountability, which was a big theme in our project, creating a public-facing dashboard for tracking. So Austin has an initiative called Strategic Direction 2023, and there are a lot of metrics, quality of life and safety and otherwise, including climate metrics that are part of this full system. And there's a public reporting dashboard where you can go and look at the graphs and see where we are in meeting a lot of these targets that were set as part of that initiative. And so the goal is to use that same platform or something similar to it, and have a way that community members can then, click on it and kind of see, okay, here's goal, goal 4, strategy 5, where are we in that? And there, from there, we can report, okay, this is in progress, or this is not yet started, or come up with a mechanism that it's easy for community members to figure out, what's in progress. And so that's in the works. Then, of course, there's the accessible community engagement portion of this. One of the things that I think was one of my favorite parts of this process was the relationship building that was done along the way with different organizations and community members, and the development of a climate ambassadors program that was a brand new pilot initiative. And so there's, within the council resolution, it said looking into expanding that program and continuing it. And so right now we are in the process of, and I'll put it in the chat in case y'all know anybody, but we are hiring for a climate equity engagement associate for a 1-year position, for somebody to really help with community engagement around pulling in people for implementation, and thinking through again how we can bring these strategies to fruition, and really much less like, oh, hey, can you provide what your priorities are around climate change planning, but actually like, okay, we have this plan. What are the barriers to actually implementing this in your community? What is your lived experience around what this strategy or this goal might look like in your neighborhood? And so we're hiring somebody to help with that, and to also have a second cohort of climate ambassadors that are more focused on implementation. And then lastly, if you're familiar with the boards and commission system, we do have a joint sustainability committee, and that is a sort of a community facing and community led, governmental board of sorts, in that it's not government employees, it's community members, but you function as a body that then makes recommendations to council. And so there are a couple of committees that the city has, and the Joint Sustainability Committee is one. The way that these committees are made is that there's different members from other commissions. And so the Joint Sustainability Committee has members from the Water and Wastewater Commission, Environmental Commission, Design Commission, Resource Management Commission, Electric Utilities Commission, and it has 13 members, right? And one of them is council appointed. And so the idea is to expand this to have there wasn't a specific number, but the idea was expand this and keep in mind racial diversity as you're expanding the Joint Sustainability Committee and adding additional members. And then that committee would then help oversee, some of this implementation. And that committee was first started, I think, with the community climate plan that was passed in 2016. And so it's kind of a continuation and an expansion of that. For us, I mentioned this climate and leadership team as the internal mechanism to provide leadership and supporting, but we're going to be working, I think I've already said a lot of what I put on this slide, but working with departmental staff in each advisory areas. And again, categorizing all of those strategies and thinking, okay, this one is underway. This one there's all the mechanisms there for it to take place, but we just need more funding. There are some that are going to require a new work plan. And then there are some that are really, much more complex, that are going to need longer term, more strategic development. And so really taking those categorizations so that we can get started on what's feasible right away, and then build a plan to move forward with some of those more complex initiatives. Because equity was a huge part of this process, we're also going to be thinking about revising our equity tool and thinking about what that equity tool looks like in the context of implementation versus planning. If any of you have kept up with the process of Project Connect, there was a community-led effort to come up with an equity tool for the implementation of that process, right? And the city is really moving in the direction of using equity evaluation tools across all of these things. And so it's great to, see all of these different processes taking place. And we want to just make sure that we, keep iterating on this type of tool to ensure that we're using that lens across the way. We do want to, we really need to rethink, or not rethink, but, think moving forward about the type of community engagement that we want to have. We had 5 advisory groups that helped draft the plan. How do we want to kind of convene those types of groups, and what does that look like in implementation? What is the role of organizations? Do we want to kind of have it's a little bit different when you say, okay, we're going to meet together for a year and write this plan out, and that's it, versus like, hey, we're doing this ongoing implementation. Like how often are we meeting? It requires some kind of restructuring into what that looks like, but we know and acknowledge the importance of having businesses and having non-governmental organizations at the table to help us move this work forward. And so that's an important part of it. And I encourage everybody to keep up with our newsletter or email me, and to stay in touch as to how that process will take place. And then lastly, we are releasing an ArcGIS story map. We found, like it's a 140-page plan, 170-page plan, I think. And so what is an easy way? We do have a summary document, but what is an easier way to show this plan and to add a little bit of storytelling to it? And so we've been working on that and are trying to move that forward. And so as soon as it's released, I can definitely share it with Kendall, who can then hopefully share it out to this whole group. And so, and this is not a comprehensive list of everything you can do, but as far as like how, can you support the plan? Well, we have a lot of different communities in Austin, and I think as hard as we try to have engagement across a lot of different sectors, we still need help spreading awareness of the climate plan. Your organization committing to some of these things, especially as we're thinking these really innovative targets like embodied carbon, and using clean refrigerants, and like really pushing for net zero construction. Like, what does that look like within your organization? What role can you play to help us advocate for that? And really thinking about your role within in your influence, your level of influence within your organization. I know that there is a lot of push from Kendall's end to get a mentorship opportunity for embodied carbon professionals going. And so can your organization be involved in that, and how? And so definitely, reach out and find ways that you can get involved. I think mentorship is a really important part of moving this work forward and increasing awareness, but also building skills so that we have a whole community of people who can then go to different organizations and advocate for these things. And then lastly, because I am, part of a government entity, a lot of this work is done through the organizing and the advocacy of individual residents. And so there's a lot to be done from a civic engagement and on y'all's end as, as individuals. It's like what you can do within your organization, but then there's also like staying involved with city council meetings that touch on these issues, and just really pushing for the civic engagement part of this work, I think is important. And, I wanted to say that because we do want to be accountable, and part of that accountability comes from engagement. So that's my email address. It's just my name at austintexas.gov with a period in between my first and last. And stay in touch. One cool thing that we're currently working on that I just wanted to mention is an Austin Youth Climate Council. Applications, already closed, but there's, I believe about 20 students that are participating in this pilot inaugural Youth Climate Equity Council that I think is something I'm really excited to see, happen, and how can this type of program help. There was a Mayor's Youth Council program in San Antonio that really helped inspire this work that EcoRise worked on, and then they worked with college students in Houston. And so youth engagement, I think, is a really awesome part, of this work, and where a lot of the enthusiasm has come from. And so I wanted to mention that, just to keep that on y'all's radar. And so I did have some slides on our equity evaluation process, but I think you all have probably already seen a lot of that, and I recognize that it's 6:13, so I want to leave some time for questions. So I will stop sharing from there. Thank you.
Thanks, Phoebe. That's a really great overview. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions for Phoebe?
Yes, I actually had two questions for you, Phoebe, and thank you for being here tonight. So several years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago, I was in charge of a commercial property, and I think the city had just implemented a program where if a commercial property exceeded, I think it was 35,000 square feet, it had to make sure that there was a recycling container that was equal to the size of the landfill container. And great new program. I was very much in support of it. I got involved and learned about it so that I could convey it to my company. And I'm sure that's growing. Is that the sort of program that falls under the jurisdiction of your office, or is that a separate program?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so, a lot of the program specific work around energy and waste will really fall with that specific department. And so I mentioned that Austin Resource Recovery is the entity that manages recycling and waste. There is a limit to that because of multifamily property versus single family. And so, if you live in a single family home, then Austin Resource Recovery has kind of purview over your recycling, your composting, and your waste. Oftentimes with commercial properties and multifamily properties, they might pick up your trash, but not recycling is done through a private company. And so I think that is kind of the challenge that we're working here. And so I know that the Zero Waste Master Plan revision is probably the place where those specific types of things will be addressed. But from an advocacy standpoint, from your office at least, the Austin Green Business Leaders Program, which I can link to, has a scorecard for different offices. And I want to mention this because this is something that I worked at a consulting firm prior to being in the city. And you basically get a scorecard, and then you fill it out based off of all the sustainable actions that your office is doing. And then you can become a platinum member or gold member, or just like a green business leader. And then you get a sticker and kind of celebrate. And so a lot of outreach has been done with this program to get different companies of different sizes to participate in the program. And as part of that, you can actually get somebody from Austin Resource Recovery to come and do like a waste audit. So I remember we did that. They'll come and they'll look at, the number of trash cans and recycling bins, and then they'll make like recommendations and give you like a free compost bin. And like, it's just like a good way to spread awareness within your organization, and to also have like a credential, like the certification, and join the network. And so I wanted to mention that. But for the specifics, another thing that Austin Resource Recovery was trying, this was right before the pandemic, was they were trying to have a pilot program for multifamily units to get into a composting program, to actually implement multifamily composting, because some properties it's kind of confusing. Like, I don't have a map of like what's Austin Resource Recovery versus a private company, but I know that they were really looking for voluntary multifamily properties to try out this multifamily composting program, because I think they recognize, like, yeah, single family composting is great, and expanding the accessibility and the neighborhoods that are that have composting access, I think has been a big part of the work that they've done. It didn't used to be all neighborhoods, right? And so they've really expanded to a lot more neighborhoods than before. But multifamily is a really important part of that. So there was work to get that done. I'm not sure specifically where that would be, but yes, a lot of that will be done through hopefully the zero waste master plan that kind of takes all of these different stakeholders and puts a plan together.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe, I'm sorry, I was under the impression that within the city of Austin limits, you had to have, if you had a dumpster for just traditional waste, you had to have a dumpster of equal size for recycling. I thought that was an ordinance that passed like 2 years ago.
Yeah, and that might be the case. I do not have like super specific knowledge on that part of things, but I know that Austin Resource Recovery doesn't necessarily like service all, but there might be regulations imposed upon other companies. I'd have to look that up. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer.
But it sounds like your office interfaces with a lot of these other existing programs governmentally at Austin, and so that's kind of the so that they're not silos. That's the idea with your office.
Yes. So
okay.
I think that's really what we're trying to make sure happens. I've been with the office for 2.5 years, and I think one of the biggest lessons learned as far as like this whole process and the equity process is to try to remove those silos and try to make sure that we're kind of in the loop with all these different policies. Unfortunately, I don't know the specifics of that. I worked more so on the buildings portion of the plan specifically, but I can get you in contact with folks from Austin Resource Recovery who can answer all of those questions specifically. And so, yes, we want to eliminate those silos. It's a work in progress, and that's just, to be fully transparent as far as like how these processes go.
Got it. And I just picked the waste, waste recovery piece as one example. I mean, that's just one example of all the different offices that you guys interface with. Got it. Okay.
Yes. We had, as part of all of the different sections, we had Austin Resource Recovery, we had Austin Energy, Austin Watershed Protection, our Urban Forestry Division. So yes, a lot of different departments were at the table with us. But as we get into like these specific program implementations, we really rely on our departmental partners to implement a lot of these initiatives and to come to the table and like approve them. And so everything that was in the climate plan was seen and reviewed by other departments. But as we get into different implementation, it'll be really important that we kind of understand different roles across different departments.
Phoebe, do you have any recommendations for someone who is looking to create a sustainable commercial project? It can be very confounding and daunting to look at the City of Austin website. It's not extremely clear where you can go to figure out, like, who should I ask this question before I submit my site plan or even ask for a preliminary meeting? Do you have any like recommendations for someone like me who is trying to develop a sustainable commercial property, but may not have a whole lot of places? I mean, you talked about community involvement and engaging all members of the community. And I will say it is a little daunting to try to tackle that on your own. And you think, okay, should I hire a consultant? Are there consultants? Is there a governmental department that can help me with this? But within the, in an informal way as opposed to a formal submission way. Do you have any advice for those of us who are trying to do this sort of thing, but are maybe a little bit smaller than some of the companies that are, represented?
Sure. Well, I think locally speaking, one of the resources that's going to be great for design is our local green building rating system. And I have found the Austin Energy Green Building team to be one of just, it's that they're accessible and easy to reach. And I know that that's kind of a different, because site plan review is also done through a development services department. But I would say that that's speaking to that team and really looking at the resources that they've developed. There's a lot of kind of lunch and learns and like, green building by design and kind of workshops that the green building team sets up to try to help, individual homeowners, but also organizations better understand some of these things. And so I would definitely look to that team for help with how to design most sustainably. As far as actual site plan development, that is, done through our development services department. And so I would start there with trying to, get a hold of those groups. And then I would say like utilizing networks like this, I think that's part of maybe the work that Kendall is trying to do as far as like, thinking about embodied carbon specifically, but it's like, how can larger firms who navigate these systems and already kind of have familiarity with how some of these processes work, how can that then, help smaller firms that are getting started and kind of create like a network around helping with landscape analysis, which I know is a lot of different pieces and maybe not the easiest answer, but I do think there's a lot of peer review because, again, our role in the Office of Sustainability is to be kind of an at-large coordinator with this work. But when it comes to actually like reviewing the site plans, right, we don't have those touch points. And so, yeah, that's kind of, what comes to mind. But again, happy to always answer questions via email. And I try to always follow up with an information stream to the best of my extent as a city employee.
Thank you, Phoebe.
I do have one more question and this will help me with a conversation I'm going to be going into next week. From your perspective at the Office of Sustainability, what cities around the country are as aggressive as Austin? And are there cities that are even way more aggressive than Austin about what they're doing? I know that I read an article about how Texas California is no longer allowing gasoline powered lawn equipment. I think that's fantastic. We're going to see a lot of used equipment here in Texas soon. But what do you think about the other cities? Like, what are the cities that are the model cities that we that are just doing it even more aggressively than we are?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I think it's really important to kind of acknowledge with cities in California and the power of the state to kind of lead on that, and cities can follow through. And I think that is a challenge that we're going to have in the state of Texas. So I think the model cities that we looked at, so there's kind of different facets of this work as far as like who's leading on what, but I think if we're thinking about buildings and like net zero construction, Denver has one of the most robust implementation plans to net zero construction that I've seen. And so really setting up, targets, looking at different typologies and really breaking it down, just like, this is the target for this type of building. This is the target for this. This is how we're going to phase the implementation of codes. This is kind of, our short-term target and our longer-term target. So I would definitely encourage folks to look at Denver's net zero building implementation plan. Then from, or cities that are working on like the equitable lens of things. Seattle has been a great example. Portland and Providence, Rhode Island have been really great about doing equitable engagement while also, pushing for aggressive targets. I know San Francisco is doing some really awesome work around circularity and like the building materials end of things, and has also had a lot of work with implementation groups and really looking at the different sectors and like breaking down commercial versus residential and municipal buildings, and like trying to do a lot of kind of breakdown from that end of things. And so I think those are some of the main cities we looked at. Vancouver has a really awesome climate plan as well, has an embodied carbon target that's not in the US, but another one I think that was really exemplary for us to read through.
Thank you. That's perfect.
I would add to that, just because from my personal experience, I used to work in Washington, D.C., and they have a pretty ambitious code amendments that they make to the International Building Code that they've adopted, to where new building construction is going to be required by code to be net zero, starting with the code adoption in 2026. And so they actually have an appendix right now for the current adoption of the code that you can design to, if you're basically piloting that net zero code minimum for new construction. And they have like a very interesting and aggressive requirements that are becoming part of the city ordinance and city code to retrofit and to classify and monitor existing buildings. So that's another example of a city that's attacking that side of things pretty hard.
Great. Thank you.
That's sort of my question, Phoebe, and maybe I've asked this before, and maybe you may not know, but how we then start to integrate these goals into code changes.
Yeah. So, so Austin Energy did have a like a code revision process that was in alignment with the international code updates, and so there is a presentation on that I just pulled up earlier today and found, but so those are done, I think, in 3-year revisions. And so it was one of these things where like the timing was difficult to align with. And maybe, yeah, Catherine, I don't know if you like, is it 3 or 5 years? That might be like a good question there.
Yeah, no, you're right, Phoebe. It's every 3 years they're revising the international code. And so as soon as they're doing that, we're revising ours. So you're exactly right. And we do what we can within the restrictions that the Texas state legislature allows. Unfortunately, that's what stops us from having a better code, what stops us from doing better promotion of electrification as well.
And it can be a bit, like I said earlier, it's a bit daunting because, so I own an HVAC business, Phoebe. You don't know me, but it can be extremely daunting to keep up with the different code changes. Yes, they're issued. I think I'm thinking back to the idea of accessibility and the idea of bringing this to a wider audience of all people, all people, because a big firm will have someone or a department that can, that's their job. A small firm, regardless of whether it's a woman-owned business or a person of color-owned business, it doesn't necessarily have those resources. And so it can be very challenging for us to not only keep abreast of what the code changes are and make sure that our particular sphere is in compliance, but the broader vision and idea as well. So code, code is code, right? I think there's a reason they call it code. Sometimes it can be a trifle inscrutable, but it's there for a reason. And it can be a little bit difficult to parse it out, to decipher it. So I'm hoping that part of this, it sounds like there's a lot of initiatives to include folks who maybe don't work at big firms and don't have a designated team to figure out what the new things are, and then implement them in their practice. I'm hoping that there's maybe an outward facing, more user-friendly version that maybe we as small business owners of any color can utilize. That would be so helpful.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point, and I think that that's exactly what the intent of a lot of this equitable engagement is about, is trying to engage small business owners into the conversation and getting the type of feedback that we're getting right now. And I know that Austin Energy really wanted, the Office of Sustainability to participate in future community engagement around some of the, again, as Catherine mentioned, there are restrictions very specifically set by the state legislature this past session about requiring electrification or rather, banning natural gas. And so we have to kind of navigate those things and really think about EV readiness and electric readiness and what that looks like within the restrictions that are set in place and those constraints. And so I know that there is a lot of desire to build a community engagement process around that in the next year. And so I think keeping y'all in the loop about that, that's something that I think we're looking forward to moving forward and making sure that there's community stakeholder voices. And certainly around implementation, and especially, because we did talk a lot about like the refrigerant strategies and what does that look like, and what is the role for reducing leakage? Like, yes, of course, it's great for like a huge grocery store chain that has a lot of resources to like take on all of these like innovative things, but what about like these like small mom and pop like corner stores, and like what is the role for helping organizations that need to be included in these things, but that aren't going to have the same level of resources either from staff or monetary resources to implement this, and how can the city help with that? So.
I think that's why we've been talking about the importance of some sort of mentorship program, Kristen, so that we could pair people from larger firms with people from smaller firms to address that gap, because there isn't that help coming from the city or from, unless you're doing an AEGB project, like Phoebe said, there's just not that resource.
But
If
once
it
you
was easy,
start
then you
working
wouldn't
with,
have to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
go ahead, Josh.
I was just gonna make a joke. So you're gonna say something more
Let's hear
important.
your joke first.
Oh, I was just gonna say if it was that easy, then you wouldn't have to hire an architect. So we got to make it a little hard.
No, so once you do apply to Austin Energy, Kristen, then you'll be assigned a consultant who will walk you through every step of the process and every aspect. If you just want to talk to someone though ahead of time without registering your project, then Mark Ledger, who I think that he and I have emailed you a little bit earlier, he's in the commercial group, and he can help you. But as far as mentorship goes, in general, most of what we have time for is to mentor people who apply to the program. But especially with single family, we help answer questions for people who aren't rating a home, but might just be doing something that isn't enough for a rating, doing part of a remodel or an addition or something like that, or just changing out their air conditioner and want some advice. But we'll also be helping, especially with the embodied carbon issue over the next few years. Because we have the mandate from City Council through the CEP to reduce embodied carbon in the new buildings in Austin by 40%. by 2030. And because concrete is the biggest component of that, both for commercial and single family and multifamily, we have been given money to help concrete companies get set up to produce EPDs so that we can be like California, and you can go on EC3 and you'll be able to put in 4,000 PSI, 3,000 PSI, and look up all the mixes, see which ones are lower carbon, and you'll even know which firms are producing those mixes, so you can call them up and say, this is what I want. And we're going to get that set up as soon as we can. And then for single family, or is my area, well, also multifamily, but mostly single family. And so what we're thinking about doing is when you register a project, we're going to go on EC3 for you and run off the chart that shows you for the 3,000 PSI mix, which seems to be what all of our customers are doing for single family. Just show it to you, show the chart to you with the names of the firms at the bottom, so you can see the range of their mixes, and you'll know without having to do any research yourself who to call to specify your mix. So we're hoping to be able to be a big help to people on that.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. I had no idea. To me, AAGB was like a, like LEED or like a rating system or something that you went to after your project was finished, basically, or like kind of in the, after, you're like, okay, can I have a, can I have a rating? Can I have a star? I didn't realize you guys provided free consultation services.
Free for everything up front. And the sooner you contact us, the better your project will be, because we'll be helping you to think about it from the word go, as opposed to after you've already designed it.
Well, that's awesome.
All right, Kristen, I didn't know you didn't know that.
Well, I know. And
My bad.
Molly Emmerich is my co-chair. I did not know that there was such an enormous and robust outreach program that was accessible to just anybody. That's wonderful news. That's excellent news.
Well, obviously our communication is not that good.
It's probably me. No, I'm sure it's me.
Because you didn't know that, and I'm sorry. Yes, absolutely. Contact us up front to help you from the very beginning. Okay. Because at the end, it's too late. You can't get a rating if you didn't work with us from the time that you start. It doesn't have to be before you start designing, but we have to be there at least before you put your sheetrock up. So you get the most out of the program the sooner you get a consultant on board to help you. So you can contact us tomorrow and we'll be on it.
Thank you.
Well, that's awesome. So, I have to run as well, but it was great chatting, and that makes me really happy that connection was made throughout this conversation. I did want to share that we do have an open position. It is a temporary position for a year. It's for somebody focused on climate engagement. It's a great position for somebody right out of college or really kind of looking to start their career in climate, and has, enjoys relationship building and talking to people and all that good stuff that comes with this work. So thank you all.
Thanks so much, Phoebe. And I hope that you can join us maybe at our happy hour on the 2nd, and hope to see you guys in person soon. All right. Yeah. Bye, guys.
Yes. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Oh, Phoebe, I was just talking to someone yesterday who's about to graduate from UT. When are you posting that position?
So it's open. I put it in the chat. It's open now until December 3rd. But if you want email me and I can also send it to you, but it is in the system already on the city jobs board, and it's open for a month. So
you'll want people before he graduates in May, then, I guess.
It is going to be a 40-hour, so full-time position.
I got you. Okay. All right. Well, I'll still let him know about it because I told him he should apply for jobs before,
Yeah,
even when he
yeah,
thinks
yeah.
he can't get them, just so to have the experience. So,
Exactly.
okay. Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.